I'm finding that to be quite common in the Netherlands right now. And so I have this thing that I hope I don't fall off of. Oh, is it not? This worked at break. Oh, I think something's happening. Cool. Yes. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, let me start from the beginning. Okay, so good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much, React Amsterdam, for having me here in this gorgeous venue and gorgeous city to talk to you today about D3 and React. My name is Shirley. I'm a freelance software engineer based in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I build data visualizations. I build data visualizations for product and for story. Sometimes I use only D3, but for most of my projects, I use D3 and React together. So whenever I mention D3 and React, I very, very often get the question, who gets control of the DOM? After all, React has the virtual DOM. So if we want React to keep track of the updates for us, they need access to the DOM. And D3 is a library for building data visualizations on the web. So of course, they need to render to the DOM, right? Actually, D3 only needs access to the DOM in 3 different places. First, with transitions, which are animations from one data state to the next. And in this case, we tell D3 all of the attributes that we want to animate. And D3 goes and calculates all of the in-between states for us and updates directly to the DOM so that we don't have to. Number 2 is with axes. And it's quite a repetitive task. If every single time you need an axis, you have to make those little ticks and little texts in SVG. So we tell D3 exactly what we want, and it does all the work for us. And finally, with brushes, again, like axes, it's quite repetitive. If every single time we needed a brush interaction, we have to go and create those draggable events, and then also all of the brushable elements. So we tell D3 what to do, and D3 goes and creates all of the elements in the DOM for us. And for all of those things that we so commonly associate with D3, things like layouts, so trees and tree maps, chord diagrams, force layouts, geo and maps, shapes like line charts, area charts, pie charts, all of those things that we so most commonly associate with D3 doesn't actually need access to the DOM. Instead, what's happening is that we give D3 our raw data, and D3 gives us back that same data, but now with information that we can use to render to screen space. And that, to me, really is the magic and power of D3. That we give it raw data, that it transforms raw data, perhaps things like average temperatures in a city across a year, and it translates that into screen space, into XY positions, into colors, into radii. And it abstracts away for us all of the tasks that are so common and so repetitive for creating data visualizations in the web. Which means that for most of our use cases, we actually can just have D3 doing the calculations, the data calculations, and React doing all of the rendering. And only in those rare cases when you specifically want D3 for their transitions functionality, for axes, for brushes, only in those cases do we need to have D3 doing both the calculations and rendering to the DOM. But before we get into the how of implementing React and D3 together, the how of implementing those two approaches, I want to take a step back, not literally because I will fall off, but I want to take a step back and ask the why. Why are we trying to use D3 and React together? Because if all we want and all we need is a simple visualization, then D3 is more than enough to do the job. Take, for example, this visualization I made of all the top summer blockbusters in the last 2.5 decades reimagined as flowers. Each of the petal shapes are parental guidance ratings. The colors represent genres. The number and size of the petals are their corresponding IMDb ratings out of 10. There's some really beautiful ones in here, like The Dark Knight Rises. I always love Harry Potter, Inception, Slumdog Millionaire. But my favorite that I always love sharing is 1997 Batman and Robin, because of how tiny and teeny and cute it is. But the only interaction I have in this piece is a simple click interaction that would take the user to their corresponding IMDb page. This visualization, the 4 years of vacations and 20,000 colors, is a personal project of mine. And it's one of my absolute favorite pieces because I feel like I learned so much about myself. But what it is I have 4,000 images that I took throughout my vacations. I pulled out the 5 primary colors from each of those photos, grouped them by the trip that I was taken on, and arranged them by the day of the trip. And the reason why it's one of my favorites is because I learned so much about myself. So I've always known that I love taking pictures of nature. So lakes and mountains and trees and oceans. So all of these blues and greens made a lot of sense to me when I was building out this visualization. But I was really confused as to why I had so many reds and oranges. And when I went in and took a look at the underlying images, it turns out they were all food pictures. So I really learned how I travel, which is that, for example, this 2014 trip to Tokyo, apparently all we did was eat. And this one to Iceland was a good balance of glaciers, gorgeous glaciers and lakes, and eating. But as you may have noticed, the only interaction in this piece is a hover interaction whenever I go over a day, and it shows me the details. So I use D3, and it's more than enough if I'm just trying to make a visualization with hover, click, and other simple interactions. But if instead what I want to do is take those interactions a step further, if I want to create a whole UI around those visualizations, then that's when React comes in really useful. This is a simple expense app I created to show the power of React and D3 together. Each of these circles are a category. Each of these dots represent an actual expense I made in June of last year. These expenses are grouped by the day they were made and colored. These dates are then colored by how much I spent in that day. So the green being the lowest amount spent, so the best, and red being that I spent way too much. And I can toggle through different weeks. I can drag an expense over a category to link them, and again to unlink them. I can drag an expense to a different date to edit it, and you can see that the background color of the date updated accordingly. Can, of course, drag it back. And this is my absolute favorite interaction I made, which is you can also add a category. So maybe parking, coffee, and of course, you can drag it back over to delete it. In this project, I use React with D3 to update all of the visualizations right away with each user manipulation of the underlying data. I also got to work on this visualization of viewer brain data as they were watching the final US presidential debate in 2016, where there's a timeline up top colored by who was speaking, and the user can drag the timeline to focus on a specific point, select any of the demographics, and then hover over the detailed timeline to dig into the details. With this visualization, I use React to link multiple parts of the visualization together so that an interaction with one part of the visualization will effectively update the other parts. And finally, an interactive visualization of every line in the musical Hamilton, where as the user scrolls, the dots fly apart and come back together, and each of these dots represent a set of lines sung by a specific character. And as they keep scrolling, I share with them the analysis I've done, as well as the tool I used and what I've learned, until they get to the very end, where I give them the whole exploratory tool that I've used for my analysis, where they can filter by any set of characters, conversations, and themes, and dig into the remaining lines to do their own analysis. For this one, I use React with D3 to manage that initial user scroll and to also manage the state of the final exploratory tool. So I use React with D3 when I want to componentize my visualizations and also to manage state as the user interacts with my visualizations. Now that we've talked about the why of using React and D3 together, I want to get into the how of using them together. And I want to go through a few simple visualizations with you and code them with you using the first approach where D3 does the calculations and React does the rendering. And here are the visualizations. So the data is weather data from last year, and I pulled them for Amsterdam, and I took the highs and lows of the 2017 and put them into a line chart, a bar chart, and a radial chart. And I also made it so that you can see the same data for San Francisco and New York. And what I'm going to do right now is to live code this in front of you, which is always really nerve-wracking, so please go easy on me and excuse me for any tiny mistakes, and please give me lots of encouragement because that, oh, thank you so much. Yes, thank you. Yes. Okay, thank you so much. So this is the code. So this is my app.cs, and all it does is it manages a state where I have the temperatures, and those will be filled in by city, and the current city that I am looking at. And all it does is goes and fetches all of my data and sets them to state, renders the drop-down, and the various charts that you see. And then I will be live coding all 3 of those charts in this file. And so all this one has currently is some things for setup with height, colors. For the state, I have highs and lows for my first line chart. And then the first thing that I want to do is this one line chart. And with this line chart, what I have is 2 SVG paths. And so our goal right now is to calculate the path commands for these 2 lines. And to do that, I have a D3 scale for taking in time, for taking in dates, and mapping them to the X position. And I have another one for taking in the temperatures and mapping them to the Y position. And so we're going to start out with component will receive props. And before you say anything, I realize that this is going to get deprecated and that there's going to be a get derived states from props. But that was a little too bleeding edge for me to demo at this conference. So we're going to stick with component will receive props. And this will get data from the parent. And we're just going to pull that out. And if the data hasn't been loaded yet, just return. And the first thing we're going to do is update the scales. For the X scale, what I'm going to do is get the min and maximum of the time. And D3 has a nice functionality for doing that. So I do d.date. Then I want to get the maximum temperature. And that would be the high. And then I'm going to update my scales with these as the domain. So this .xScale.domain, pass in time domain. Do something similar with the Y scale, pass in 0 as my minimum and the temp max as my maximum. Now that we have these scales updated, I want to create a line generator with D3. So I'll call it line generator is equal to D3 line. And what this does is it will translate the data we give it into SVG path commands. So let's do that. This line generator dot X is this. So I'm saying I want to my X positions to use this .X scale d.date. Do that for the Y. This .Y scale d.high. Oh, and I forgot to mention earlier that because I'm like on a time constraint, I'm not going to be able to explain absolutely everything, but all of this code, all of this finished code with comments is up online, and I'll tweet it later. And so now I can say highs is equal to this line generator and pass in my data. And this should give me a long string right here. Ooh. It should give me this string that we're going to pass into the SVG path. So let me do that right now. I'm going to set state highs. And then right here, all I got to do is create a path element, pass in my data I just created. I'm just going to say fill is none, stroke is red that I've defined up above. Yes! Thank you. Yay! That's it. That's all that took for that first line. And the second line is even easier. So this one, I want to use the lower temperature. I'll call it lows. And then pass it in create another path element, this time using the lows data. Make the stroke blue. Although now I think about it, for some reason it's flipped. I'll look into that later. Just pretend that, they're the right colors. And now I'm going to show you how easy it is, because if you just see those two lines, you'll get really confused, right? Because it has no axes. And so I'm going to show you how easy it is to just drop in axes with D3. And so I've defined some things. So I'm using D3 axis bottom and axis left. And I've defined some things. And all I have to do now is create some group elements. So I'm going to create one for the x-axis and another one for the y-axis. And because this is with D3 doing the rendering, I'm going to do it in component did update. And all I have to do is use D3 to select those elements and call the axis generator that I created here. Look at that. Look at that above. And you might notice that they're in the wrong place. So all we have to do is translate it. So we don't have to translate anything in the x position, but we just have to translate it height minus margin dot bottom. And then there you go. Another one, and then let me just copy and paste for the y-axis. And then let me also make sure to transform them correctly. This time with margin dot left, nothing in the y direction. And that's it. Well, it's a little bit off. I think I might be missing something. I see what I've done. So pardon me as I do this. Margin dot top, no, height minus margin dot bottom and margin dot top. Okay, that you'll see why later. There we go. Yay! Thank you. Oh, this encouragement is so awesome. Thank you. I have 7 minutes left to go through the other two charts. So we got this. It's good. It's good. So now we're going to make the bar chart. And so for that bar chart, all that's happening is a bunch of SVG rectangles with the y position being the high temperature and the height being the high temperature minus the low temperature. So actually, the code is even easier than what we just did, where we only need the x and y scale. Let's keep the updates to the scale. And all we gotta do is then bars is equal to data.map d. And we just gotta make a return. And here, let's get y1 is equal to this dot y scale and d dot high. Const y2 is equal to y scale d dot low. X is d dot x scale. And the date, y is y1, height is y2 minus y1. And then we set that in state. And here, we take the data we just created, we loop through them, this dot state dot bars dot map d. And for each one of them, we want a rectangle with x is, d dot x, y is d dot y. Width, I'm just going to set it to 2. Height is equal to d dot height. And this should do it. There we go. And then, as you notice, it's kind of ugly and black. So what I'm going to do is create a color scale for myself. Get the average temperature as the domain for the color. This dot color scale, set that as domain. Then use it in the data here. Fill is colors, this dot color scale, and use d dot average. Then down here, put that in as fill, d dot fill. That's it. Yay! And because this is React, this of course updates whenever I update the city. One more, and I got 4 minutes. I want to show you, I feel like this one looks really nice and fancy, but I want to show you how easy this is too. So for this one, we have to update things a little bit. I'm just going to call each of those a slice. So each of these are SVG paths, and I'm using D3 again to calculate the path command to create these shapes. So this time around, what I need is just a scale for calculating the radius. Oops. Yeah, so radius scale is equal to D3 scale linear. And I want my output, my range, to be from 0 to width divided by 2, basically the size of the container. And actually, let me make the container bigger. And then I don't actually need these axes anymore. So let me delete all of these. And here, I no longer need some of these things. And now, let me create these slices. Const slices equal to, let's see, data.map d. And then here, I'm going to make some path commands is equal to, hold on. I also need a arc generator is equal to d3.arc. And let's use that arc generator and pass in some data. So I want my start angle, there we go. So start angle to be per slice angle is equal to 2 time math.pi divided by the length of the data. So I want my start angle to be I times that. I times per slice angle. And I want my end angle to be I plus that slice angle. I want my inner radius to be the low temperature. So that means this dot radius scale, pass in d dot low. And I want my outer radius to be this dot radius scale d dot high. And this will give me back a string for SVG path. But I also want some colors. So what I'm going to return is this path and the fill, which was just colors, this dot color scale, d dot average. And now, if I've done everything right, all I have to do is this dot state dot slices dot map d and return path, where d is the path that we just calculated. Fill is also what we just calculated. Wish me luck, wish me luck. No! This dot arc generator. No. What am I doing wrong? Oh, this dot radius scale. Thank you. Now all I need to do is move that to the center. And to do that, all I have to do is say transform, translate, width divided by 2. and height, divide by 2. And that's it. Thank you. Oh, thank you so much for that encouragement. You don't know how much I'm shaking right now. But as you may have noticed, all of those approaches were the first one where the data does the calculations and where D3 does the calculations and React does all of the rendering. And we didn't talk anything about if we wanted if we wanted D3 to do the rendering. And if you want to learn more about that, if you want to learn how D3 renders the DOM and how it all works, I have some workshops available and upcoming if you want to check those out. But more than anything, I hope that this talk has informed you about not only about when or why we should use React and D3 together, but also that it's really, really easy and approachable to use React and D3. And not only that it's super easy to make those sophisticated looking visualizations that you might see online. And more than anything, I hope that this will inspire you to go and learn D3 for yourself, that it will get you to start creating data visualizations, that it will get you so hooked that you will join me in creating custom interactive data visualizations for the web. Thank you so much.